His name was Friedrich Harman. This is the story of a psychopathic maniac. This story is the real truth. Fritz's first victim is a 17-year-old Frieder, whom the maniac met on the street and invited to live with him. The boy quietly sent a postcard to his mother, in which he wrote that he was sheltered by a kind uncle and indicated his address. He had no idea about Harman's psychopathy. Friedel's mother, having received the postcard, immediately went to the police. The police came to Harman. As Harman later told, at the moment when the police broke into his house, the maniac was just finishing butchering the murdered man and the boy. The young man's head was lying behind the curtain, covered with a simple newspaper. The police didn't find her. As for the meat, Harman said it was just beef. A little later, he was still arrested, and then sentenced to 9 months for indecent behavior. After entering from prison, Harman realized that it was necessary to choose his victim more carefully. It would also be nice to make friends with the police. His army background helped him in this. After a couple of months after his release, the maniac became a freelance police officer. Using the title, he began to visit the central station often. That's where he found his victims. Most of the disappeared were tramps. No one was looking for them much. Harman chose the most neglected and dirty teenager or young man. I came to him, showed him a police badge, offered to live in a closet at a butcher shop. In most cases, the tramps agreed. After a couple of days or weeks, he would kill them. It always happened the same way. He strangled the victim, and when she lost consciousness, he chewed the throat of the still alive guy, drinking blood. Harman didn't kill any women, he splashed their blood. In 1919, Harman met Hans, who became his accomplice in crimes. Grant suggested adding sausages to the victim's meat, which were cooked in Harman's melting. In 1923, Hans established the sale of human meat under the guise of beef. Until the middle of 1924, Harman killed mostly those whom Grant chose. On the 22nd of June, 1924, Harman tried to force a young man named Fromm to go with him to eat meat. The guy didn't want to and heard about the murder of tramps from the train station. He refused. Harman tried to take the young man away with his foot. Fromm resisted. The police arrived at the station and detained both of them. Harman was not helped by the rank of a policeman. At the station, Fromm confidently stated about the murder of people from the train station. The police listened to the words of the young man. Friedrich was searched. They found the remains of human bodies, and the Germans were caught in the shop at the moment when he was butchering the body of a guy who had disappeared just recently. After the arrest, the clothes from their apartment were examined by relatives and family members of the missing. At the same time, it turned out that Hans Grand's wardrobe consisted entirely of the victim's clothes. At the trial, Harman admitted that he had killed 24 boys, but the number of bodies, according to investigative data, was 27. According to his own testimony, he killed his victims by biting their necks, then dismembered them. Harman was sentenced to death by decapitation. After hearing his verdict, he first fell into a stupor, and then just laughed. "I'm coming back anyway," he shouted. "You know vampires are immortal." I am a psychiatrist. I work at the Center for Adaptation and Socialization of Children. My cases are not just the downtrodden children of drunks, they are children and teenagers who are somehow involved in violence committed by their relatives, as accomplices or silent witnesses. It is no easier to return to normal life a child who knows where his mother's corpse is buried in the yard than if he himself was a victim of a crime. The boy I want to tell you about is called Pashka, or Jenka, or Eugene. We did not find his birth certificate. There is also no record of him in the registry office. Who his mother is unknown. It is only known that he really is the biological son of an ogre. You will not find publications in the media about his detention and trial, because there was no detention or trial. The police beat him to death and the case was dealt with in a strictly closed manner. The boy was handed over to us. They ate only women. A woman who found herself alone on the street at dusk met on her way not an unfamiliar man from whom she should have run and shouted, but a beautiful 5-year-old child, frightened and tearful. The boy introduced himself as Pashka or any other name of his choice, huddled up to the woman and asked to take him home. Rare witnesses saw a woman walking somewhere with a blonde boy, endlessly thanking kind Aunt Nadia, Sveta, Tanya. As it turned out later, he always asked for their names. The worried father of the lost child also caused the woman only positive feelings. Shortly after this meeting, the father and son loaded the corpse into the trunk and returned home to cook for themselves. Not a single traffic cop has ever examined the car, because there was a child in the cabin who had severe toothache. The boy was present during the entire cooking process, during cutting, preservation, and all this time he continued to name what his father, Aunt Nadia, Sveta, and so on were cutting into pieces. Moreover, he also called frozen briquettes and cans of canned human meat. The investigator fainted when the child began to list, pointing to the glass jars. "This is Aunt Vasilina," she was limping. "And this is Aunt Alia," she kept asking if I wanted to eat. Perhaps this Aunt Alia was Alia Bykarenko, a high school student who disappeared 7 months before. When the child was assigned to us, he was about 8 years old. He was thin and small for his age, responded to a dozen names at once, could read and write. One of his skills was particularly striking: he was able to win people over. After 10 days of working with him, all women refused, from psychologists to nurses. He saw women exclusively as food. Examined, cuddled, sniffed. Nothing concrete, but there was something in the whole behavior that it was impossible to be around. Soon he realized it himself, realized what it threatened him with, and changed his behavior. Not right away. Gradually, he began to cry at night, tossing in nightmares, calling for his mother and throwing tantrums. But you know what? At the same time, his pulse practically did not quicken. But only I paid attention to the pulse, as well as the fact that he did not eat meat. And then they began to implicitly, but noticeably suspend me from working with him. Other doctors' certificates appeared in his chart, even though he was my patient. As a result, there was a scandal with the director of the center. I behaved incorrectly. I fell for the director's handout and refused the patient. 3 months later, an invited psychiatrist testified that there were no mental abnormalities. The recommendation of the center's psychologist sounded strange and ridiculous. And a month after placing the boy in a special boarding school, a family of farmers found him, who wished to adopt him. Pavel, so called, became their third adopted problem child. For 3 years I have been secretly collecting information about this family. The farm is growing all the time. If 3 years ago they supplied meat only to the homes of the wealthiest residents of the city, now they send meat to other cities as well. It cannot be purchased at retail, only exclusive deliveries to selected customers. All the children, including Pavel, are actively working on the farm. The family is friendly. I myself have repeatedly seen through binoculars how they fry kebabs in their yard, and Pavel eats them. Apparently, this meat suits him quite well. Needless to say, of all the cows and pigs in their farm, not a single one was slaughtered during these 3 years.